All right. Hello, my friends. Good to have you here. I want to talk to you today about passive aggressive manipulative behavior that we might so call it. And I want to come to you from a sense of having the creating the self awareness around us ourselves as we behave in this pattern. I really find that the more that I've explored in the way that I communicate with other people and how I'm showing up in my world, is that passive aggressive behavior kind of is something that I might have picked up along the way in my life. And that is kind of how I relate to other people, thinking that that is just normal behavior. And it's not until I kind of stopped and stepped back and looked at the way in which I was wording things or how I was addressing things, I realized that there was a part of me that was really trying to, I guess you could say, have the upper hand in the conversation in a way that I was thinking that there was this normalcy, like this is where we should be. And then when somebody does something or says something, I say things like, you don't really believe that, do you? Or you're not going to wear that, are you? Or you don't really want to think that way, do you? When I start to question or say things thinking that this is a normalcy or what I believe is the normal way, then I kind of interpret and put myself in the situation thinking, well, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. That's not how you do that. You're supposed to do it this way. And when we do that, a lot of times we think we're just being suggestive, right? We're just giving them our opinion or stating something instead of realizing kind of the leadiness of the question. And it makes me think about, like in a court of law, you'll hear judges saying, don't lead the witness, things like that. And it's when we are kind of trying to get to a destination and we think that that's what we need to be doing in the conversation, realizing that if we really want to understand or relate to somebody, we wouldn't lead a conversation somewhere because we'd want them to be able to be authentic and be themselves in the conversation. And in order to do that, we don't need to lead any questions. We just need to hold space for them to be them and experience whatever it is they're experiencing. And we just get to be the observer of that experience. And being the observer of ourselves really helps us in the way that we can show up in a conversation with people, in the way that we connect with people, and not be leading people down a certain way or a path in which we think is the quote unquote right way that we should be behaving. And anytime we're thinking that or we're kind of believing that there's a right or wrong way to something is when we really get ourselves, we can start to step back and notice that leading in a question, that passive aggressiveness, that manipulating the conversation, and how we show up in that way. And the majority of us do it in some form, and we don't do it on purpose. It's not like we're trying to be that way. It's more of a behavioral pattern that we might have had for a long time, and that's how we think it's the way to have the conversation with somebody. And until we stop and actually observe that for ourselves, we don't see anything wrong with it. So that's what I want to talk about is kind of stopping and observing that for ourselves and thinking, so how do I want to show up in this relationship? And what's a good question I could be asking to be more inquisitive and wanting to understand where they're coming from and not put myself in the situation or think that this is the normal and that, well, you don't think this way or this is the better way to think, right? Instead of viewing it that way, just being open to, well, can you explain that more to me? I don't quite understand this. I want to know more. Could you explain that to me? How do you feel about that? Explain to me how that feels, because some people more based on the feeling of what they're feeling. Other people, it's based more on the thought and the way that they're seeing it. And so making sure that we're asking those questions to open us up to more possibility instead of shutting down to a certain way that it should be. Like we think that this should be a certain way. You know, so when it comes to passive aggressive behavior, it's kind of funny because you hear that word being tossed around a lot. And what's interesting about it is that The truth of the matter is we all play to it to some sort. Um, we all, do it in a certain way until we actually become aware of the pattern happening. We see it in our in just in life in general, in the way that things are stated and the way that people kind of show up and the way that advertisement is brought to us and the way that all these things, and we think this is a normalcy. And so when we start communicating that way, we think we're just trying to communicate and understand while sharing our point of view in the communication. So the first thing with passive aggressive or manipulative, speaking, is to step back and go, what is it that I want in this relationship? Am I looking to connect more with them? And if I am, what are some questions I can ask that will make, that will actually bring out what they're saying so I can understand and comprehend it and not put myself in that scenario or not lead it down a certain way or think that this is the way that we want it to go. And really opening up to that is a challenge because we think we have the right answers a lot of the times. I still do it as well. Like we do that. We think that this is the right way. We want to view it this way. So just opening up to conversation. So asking questions like, how do you feel, about that? Would you explain that to me? I'd like to understand. What do you think? Did you come to this conclusion? Tell me more. I'd like to hear more about that, So expanding upon things as opposed to putting yourself in it, saying statements like, you don't really believe that. You aren't going to do that, are you? What is wrong with you? So when we state things like that, we're obviously trying to lead the conversation a certain way, believing that there's that medium, right? And this is the normalcy. So we're leading it down that way. And we kind of do that as a safety precaution. So when we know and we understand that we have this autopilot that's trying to keep us safe and secure, that's kind of how it shows up in our lives, we can sit there and go, oh, that's right. It's trying to keep me safe because if I get this information, somehow I think that that's going to do something to me. But when we kind of can sit there and just allow the information to come and we don't react to it, instead we just observe it and we just kind of take it in, we're like, oh, okay. We can kind of keep that difference, right? We can kind of keep that space, that kind of open space for more possibilities instead of closing off to it should be this way. And when we start to do that, then we have more understanding of ourselves, and it gives us more ability to open up the space to others to experience whatever they need to experience. And then that actually creates that deeper connection with us because we're not trying to change something or lead something or persuade them into thinking some other way. Instead, we're just holding it and we're understanding that we just want to try to understand and comprehend that. So really, the first step is just realizing when we do that, when we do certain things and we're trying to manipulate, we kind of stand back and we go, oh, I was doing that. And being able to be vulnerable and open up and be courageous and be like, okay, I was doing that. I don't want to show up that way. I really want to understand how you see it. And I don't want to be leading it to try to get a certain result or a certain outcome. Instead, I want to just be open to seeing it your way. And when you kind of start to have that dialogue, it really can connect you with people, whether it's in work, whether it's at home, whether it's in any communities, and it gives you the opportunity to kind of explore that. And some people might be taken back by it. Some people might not know how to respond to it. You might not even know how to respond to it because you're exploring new territory. And going into that and realizing, yep, I'm exploring new territory. This is not a normal behavior that I used to do before. And so it's going to feel a little bit awkward. And I'm okay with feeling a little bit awkward because I want to connect more and not lead the conversation. I want to allow space for it to be organically done and just let it be there and not feel like I have to control it. And when we start to do that, we really do start to connect more with each other. So really it comes to, right, the first part of it is us being self-aware that we do that we do lead questions, that we do have, passive aggressive behaviors, that we can manipulate a situation. And we do that not based on trying to do it, more of a behavioral pattern most of the time. That's what's going on. Then we become self-aware of that and we go, okay, that's what I'm doing. And then we can kind of see it in our life. We don't have to like point it out that they're being, passive aggressive or that they're trying to control the situation. We just can be an observer of it. And then we can go, okay, so how do I want to show up in this scenario? Even if they're leading the question, how do I want to respond to that? Do I want to respond that way that they asked? Do I want to respond a different way? And just having that courage to kind of self-explore it for yourself and not put it on them, but put it on yourself and go, okay, how do I want to show up in this conversation now so that I can connect more with them? Maybe as they're asking me these questions, maybe I can go, can you explain that more to me? And just kind of get, because maybe coming to the root of it, you come to find out that they didn't even realize that they were doing that. And then as you just kind of start getting more curious, then it becomes more based on understanding it and not trying to persuade it or trying to make it go a certain way, right? Then we can start to become more open to it. And then they might even experience kind of a more openness to it, which can allow more conversation back and forth. So when it comes to communications, the fascinating thing about communication is it really takes courage on your part, on only one person's part normally, to actually create more intentional communications. Intentional not by leading it or by being passive aggressive or manipulating the situation, but intentional by choosing to be consciously aware that I might be showing up this way, I'm not meaning it, or they're asking questions like that, and I don't think they're meaning it, so how can I respond in a way that will help us both open up in this scenario? What does that look like? And I'm willing to get it wrong. I'm willing to try and communicate, but also get it wrong and then walk away and go, okay, now what can I do with this information? It's really just putting yourself out there and being willing to get it wrong and telling your brain it's okay if I get it wrong, because your brain wants to protect you. It wants to say, nope, we better not do that. We've never done that before. This is how we normally have responded, so let's respond this way again. And so it's having that communication with yourself and being willing to get it wrong and being willing to open up and asking more questions and getting curious and deciding that there isn't a right or wrong to it. It doesn't have to be leading or not leading. It can just be dialogue. And that can be all that we need to be doing right now. And maybe that can be helpful for me, and maybe it'll be helpful for them, who knows? But in any way, it's just finding that, that way that you want to communicate with each other and being open to it and willing to get it wrong. Because sometimes we will get it wrong, because that's part of developing in our communication skills in general, because we have old behaviors and patterns that we are used to and going, oh, that's right, this is going to feel a little uncomfortable because I'm not used to this, and I'm willing to get this wrong. All right, my friends, be willing to open up to communications, realize that we all show up in all different ways. Sometimes we're being manipulative with our conversation. Other times we're being passive aggressive, and that's part of all of our natures. We do that in some form or another, and just recognizing it into a situation where we can use it to our benefit. So we can go, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. And then we can kind of grow from there. All right, my friends, I hope this was helpful. I look forward to talking to you again in another week with another topic. All right, take care. Until next time. Bye.